Start now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Look, I might just dive in because it's 7:03, and we'll turn up on time, so let's go for it. So, welcome to my webinar about life-centered design. Hello, welcome from Italy in Amsterdam. First of all, has anyone who's heard of life-centered design and wants to give me their thoughts on what it is? Has anyone heard of it or heard something similar? Maybe you're being shy, maybe you don't know it all, and that's why you're here. So I'll dive in. Um, so basically, life-centered design is about expanding human-centered design to consider the needs of all the life forms that we impact. And its bigger goal is to really balance a thriving existence for all life. And from a more, I guess, sort of logistical perspective, it's about recognizing that 80% of the impact of the things that we make, the environmental impact that they have, can be determined at the design phase. And this all connects up through the business and has planetary impacts. So life-centered design is about using design to align what we do at the design level and the business level with global goals. And it's introducing some really cool, interesting new tools. There's ecosystem mapping. So ecosystem mapping isn't really new, but it's about a way, it's looking at your your subject, your design business or your product or your subject, whatever it is, and zooming out and seeing if it's a product, you look at the life cycle and seeing the impacts it has on environments and invisible communities. Um, and then the sort of the wider impacts that it may have, but recognizing and tracing back these impacts to the planet, both on an animal and a plant level and a human level. And then we can create these personas for them. So these are called non-human personas or non-user personas, and these are just new versions of these old tools, which were like customer personas that we make. And but we make them now for the animals and the plants and invisible and vulnerable people that are impacted by our work. And that way we can keep them in mind when we design things. So these are some really cool new tools that are coming out from life-centered design that expand the tools that we have, the human-centered design tools, to make them more life-centered. And it's about recognizing that we don't just design things, we actually design and release new ecosystems. When you zoom out and see things as a system, and you see that it spans sometimes countries, time. It's this living, breathing ecosystem that lasts for quite a while, particularly if parts of it take a long time to break down, and they constantly have this impact. So they're like an ecosystem. At the moment, the dominant relationship with the planet is the Euro-Western relationship and this capitalistic take, make, waste sort of lifestyle. We're taking things, we're making things, they're targeted at specific uses and specific users. And there's no real great collective ways to collect things at the end and reuse them, so they end up as waste and pollution. And along the whole cycle is a whole lot of waste and pollution. So a lot of these ecosystems and our behaviors and activities that are ecosystems are quite negatively impactful. And it's about so we need to kind of expand these three areas of design. So one is from focusing just on business and user needs, to designing for the needs of all the life forms impacted by our projects. And not just focusing on target use or target customers, but designing for ultimate accessibility and modularity and adaptability and inclusivity as well. And moving from focusing just on constant growth to allowing things to grow and degrow as well, so that businesses can perhaps swap their revenue streams at different times, so one can grow, one can degrow, just to take the pressure off these natural resources and these human resources that we identify in ecosystem mapping. So that means that this problem where we have 80% of the impact of environmental impact of what we design is determined at design is an opportunity. We can turn that around and we can make 80% of positive impacts and shift from this take, make, waste lifestyle and way of living on the planet to a more regenerative one by reducing the materials that we extract, reusing things, remaking things, recycling, and finding ways to actually use our power and our business and our design to give back more to the planet and heal the things that we take from. And in that way, we can align. It's about aligning basically design, business, and planetary goals. And ultimately, it's about doing less harm and doing more good. So taking less, producing less waste and pollution, but giving back more, regenerating the things that we impact, regenerating things that are the most vulnerable at the moment on the planet as well. So I'm Damien Lutz. I'm a UX designer. I've been a UX designer and researcher for about 30 odd years. And over the last few years, I've been researching, experimenting with futuring and life-centered design. So I'm the founder of Life Centered Design Lab. It's an online innovation lab and also future scouting. Those certificates are there just to show that these different areas I've been learning that represent the different design practices that come together in life-centered design. From my perspective, it brings together about 12 different design practices: human-centered design, inclusive design, behavior design, but then things like interspecies design, which helps us design things that include animals and are aware of how them being in the space, like guide dogs, that sort of thing. More than human personas, systems thinking, circular design, brings together all these design practices that normally work on different levels. And when you start to learn them, you can then move between these different levels and become more of a generalist and see the impacts, the broader impacts of the designs of your design work. So this is the design Life Centered Design Lab. It's as I said, it's an online resource hub, some guidebooks, some courses, and some services. Something I've been developing over the last few years, doing some research and experiments, applying this this framework to digital services, to physical products, from small businesses to large businesses. I'm going to share some of those examples of those with you a bit later as well. And I've been now working with this with universities and design teams to explore how they can incorporate into their work as well. Some really interesting projects have come out of this. Adapt New South Wales. New South Wales is a state here in Australia where I live, and Adapt New South Wales is about adapting to climate change. So it's recognizing that climate change is happening. It's not just mitigating, we've got to adapt to it as well. This is Adapt New South Wales is a really great conference, and we explored how to make a design a more than human Sydney. So Sydney is my hometown, and we did that by creating non-human personas for all the urban wildlife and looking at all the ubiquitous human-made spaces like bus stops, galleries, libraries, public pools, and how can we redesign them to nurture the needs of the urban wildlife as well, because their biodiversity, and as we know, biodiversity is intrinsically linked to climate change. So the worse climate change gets, the more biodiversity we lose, and the more biodiversity we lose, the worse climate change gets. So designing things for more than human needs helps us battle climate change. Also doing ecosystem mapping, so with some businesses looking at the wider impacts of their products so they can really see the broader impacts and determine which sort of non-humans they can make personas for and start making a change. This is a really interesting project. I just got back from Milan in Italy with a university called Politecnico. It's a university that is right next door to a forest. It's called a spontaneous forest. So it's one that has grown over and started to reclaim an old industrial site. And it's full of life now. But the university is starting to expand into it. And the professor there, Fabio Di Liberto, he invited me over to bring some tools from my design lab to help the students look at the forest, understand its needs, create personas for them, look at how the forest handles ecosystem and learn from the forest, and use those sort of insights to redesign how the new expansion of the university would impact the forest less. In fact, be designed in a way that they would coexist and nurture each other's needs. Really fascinating. I've put together a little tiny documentary, and I'm going to share that in the next couple of weeks. So this is like This is what life center design can be about as well. It's about more than human thinking, more than human design. So I'm just going to share with you a few case studies to see how it can be applied at different levels. So first of all, what can small business do? So as part of my development of my framework, I applied it to my business, which at the time was just a website, a book, and a toolkit. But it was a really good opportunity to apply it to both a digital product, like a website, and a physical product. And first of all, some initial ideas came out to reduce, to do less harm, and first of all, using print on demand. So instead of going to a traditional publisher, I've self-published. I can use print on demand. Traditional publishers will produce print in bulk, ship bulk loads of books around, which is using carbon, and then a lot of them cannot be sold and end up as waste. I use sustainable web design, so my website uses less energy, so I'm taking less energy and creating less carbon, and then openly sharing the commitments on my website, so that helps me sort of keep myself accountable as well. And so by doing simpler things like that, straight away you start to link yourself to sustainable development goals, like these two: climate action and responsible consumption production. So you can start to use some tools to use your business or your product or your design subject, whatever it is, to actually start using its power and its influence to contribute to those global goals. This was an early ecosystem mapping tool that I did, and it revealed there was an obvious impact, and that is trees. Trees were cut down to make my books. So I made a persona for them, but also highlighted two other non-users actually, so that are impacted. First of all, education. I'm in design education. Straight away, if you can't afford design education, you are marginalized. So I'm always thinking about how can I help them with my business. And that flag there is the First Nations Australians. And through my research, I could see that they were not mentioned at all in any of the research about their input in regards to sustainable design and sustainable living. So I sort of make it my ethos to make sure that they're included as much as possible. So I made a persona for trees just to really understand it more. Really cool thing about non-human persona is that it's a method and a tool. So the method is where you really learn about this part of nature that you are taking from or impacting. And just that process establishes empathy. It's really hard to not think about them going forward after going through that process. But then you've created a tool that maintains the empathy through the process, through the design and decision-making stages. And so that helped me kind of think more deeply, and so I started to donate back to tree conservation as well. And then for the non-users I was talking about, I'm keeping First Nations people in conversation in any of my writings and my projects and presentations, and I provide free discounted open source material for people that can't afford the other products and services that I have. So, and that connects me to two more sustainable development goals: life on land and reduced inequalities, that I can further start to innovate ways to give back to them. And that's connecting me to global goals, connecting this one little business to global goals. And using products in a deeper way. So the back of my books is about how to keep the book circular, how to maintain it. If a page falls out, use this vegan glue. What to do with it if you want to get rid of it, ways to keep it out of the rubbish, etc. And on the website, I can start to talk to people in a way to connect them with trees. Hey, if you love books, you should start to think about being a caretaker for trees, and enabling them to do that by giving them links to donate, etc. This is kind of an interesting thing about life center design, is when you start to connect to these global goals and to these non-human aspects, you realize there's kind of a dual purpose to your business or your project. For me, it's about design education, but I'm also looking about how to connect people with trees and making more of an awareness of where these materials come from, where they enjoy my books. To put this at more of a business perspective, this represents my business model, say just making books about design, extract materials out of the planet, make and supply the books just for particular users. The benefits of those two ticks: so educating designers, create business profit, and then eventually I'll kind of waste up. Hopefully some get recycled, but they can end up as waste and pollution. But by applying life-centered design thinking, suddenly you've got all these other ticks, all these other values that come out of it. Regenerating nature through donating to tree conservation, reducing the use of trees by using print on demand. At the other end, reducing waste because I'm using things like behavioral design and teaching people how to keep the books out of waste. Educating designers about planet-friendly behavior, using sustainable web design, so I'm creating less carbon, etc. So suddenly shifting from this little business where it has a little bit of value for specific just for myself and my users, creating value for the planet and more people as well. And it may not seem like much, but if you times that by millions of little businesses, and then if the big businesses get on board, it could be quite a big impact. And it's all about doing what you can now with the power that you have. And the more that you get into this, the more you realize how much power you actually do have, and how developing more of these sort of life-centered design skills that you can amplify that power. Okay, so what can mass production do? So I looked at a real problematic ubiquitous item, mattresses. They're massive, they're bulky, they use a lot of material, they use a lot of energy to move around, creating a lot of carbon. 36 million produced a year in the US and 2.6 million end up discarded in landfill or in nature. So a massive, massive problem. So taking a life-centered lens to them, first of all, is looking at them. This is a type of systems thinking. It's a product life cycle analysis. So looking at where the materials come from out of the planet, what are the processes to make the materials or turn the materials into the parts and create the mattress, how it's shipped, how it's used, how it's discarded, or if it's recycled, and what happens all along the way. What are the inputs and the outputs? The interesting thing about that is so that helps you identify problems. What's really interesting is the ones in green. So what this identified is that there's a high water use from the rivers. This is based on a cotton latex mattress. Cotton uses a lot of water from irrigation. There's a lot of chemical runoff into rivers. And at the other end, there's a lot of chemical leaching into rivers from all the discarded mattresses in landfill. So this identified actually that river systems can be a non-human persona that we can create for mattress manufacturers. So I created one and got to know them a lot more. I won't go into the detail of this, but this is a way of understanding the role and the relationship and the importance of this non-human that you're taking from and impacting. It helps you get different perspectives of how to have a different relationship with them, identifies their needs and their threats, and you can also see any sort of common needs that humanity has with them that you can really nurture and prioritize. And so from this, I can start to think about, okay, how to improve the design and the life cycle design. But it takes you by creating personas and creating that empathy with, in this case, the river systems, it can sort of innovate further. So one idea was to create an app for users to help them, remind them to flip and rotate, but just basically look after their mattress longer so it lasts longer. But you can take it further by talking about, hey, did you know that your mattresses actually rely on river systems? These are the rivers near you. Connecting them with this part of nature, get involved in sort of cleanup events, and just spending time out there in nature with these rivers. So when you go to sleep every night, you're remembering, rivers have helped me have this nice sleep. And then even going further, creating bedtime stories for kids. So we started to educate kids about where these things come from nature, and even intertwining those stories with First Nation stories and stories from different cultures. So what you can start to do is actually use your design and through life-centered design to deepen, to not just produce something that satisfies a sort of a consumer need, but it deepens the relationships between people and people, and deepen the relationship between people and nature. And they're the two key relationships that First Nations people have been talking about as key relationships for tens of thousands of years. Okay, so what can the digital world do? And this can be tricky because it's hard to see, uh, the actual physical impacts when you're just surfing on a website. And if you own a website, it's hard to have any impact on the technology and make that more sustainable. So what can we actually do? And again, it's about thinking about what's the power that you have. And I looked at social media. I use Instagram a lot. I love it. And through a bit of sort of systems mapping, I realized that its power is its algorithms. They really know what people want. I've downloaded my data from Instagram and could see that they know the make and model of my phone, so they can target ads when they think I want to get a new iPhone. With but so in a way they're kind of contributing to a lot of e-waste. So how can they use that algorithm to actually reduce something physical, and that their impact in the physical world, which is e-waste? And they can do that by creating a persona for e-waste to really understand the problem areas where it ends up, but also just understanding that it's actually not just waste, it's something that really wants to be reused and utilized many, many times. So through sort of some innovating, I was looking at, okay, they can use their algorithm to show adverts to me when they think I want a new iPhone, but at the same time, they could show adverts for responsible handling of my old device. First of all, they could encourage me, they know that I'm with Apple, and they can show ads for repairing it, trading in the old one, and getting it recycled as well. So they don't have to stop showing ads to sell phones, but they can at the same time just kind of ensure that there's sustainable behavior of the old phones, or try to extend the value of your current one. The recycling one is interesting because in Australia we have Mobile Muster, and they will basically send you a satchel for free, and you put your old phone in it, you send it back, and it's all free. On Instagram at the moment, so on the left is just like a mock-up of the journey. It's about at least 5 steps on Instagram to order that satchel. You've got to know that Mobile Muster is there. You've got to find the website, and you've got to find the form on the website. But Instagram could elevate that with one ad that links directly to the form. Maybe they show that, once every time they show an ad for a new phone, just working out some sort of business model where they're actually using their power to not just sell things, and create e-waste, but also to try and mitigate it. And it's all about doing less harm and more good. So taking less, producing less waste, and using the power that we have to regenerate things. I've got a few more things to go through, but I'd sort of just stop briefly and just see if there's any questions about what you've seen so far, or any thoughts. If you've seen anything similar, if anything sort of resonates with you, anything you want to share, if you're doing any work like this.
Hi, Damien, thank you. I'm Elena. I actually read your book, Non-Human Personas, so I've seen these concepts before, thanks to your book. But it was surely interesting to see more examples about like personas, and also the example about the river. So being conscious about the connection from your mattress and the river. So that's
nice, right?
Yeah.
Imagine we sort of identify those with all our products. Have you got to put the non-human personas into action at all?
Not yet. Actually, we mostly work with the design thinking, like regular one, but I'm really interested in integrating the non-human personas or the life-centered design tools into design thinking. So that's why also I'm here to understand how I can do that.
Cool, you might like my course then, so I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of tricky, but there are ways to do it. The idea is try to get that to make them fit into the existing workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just check if anyone else had anything else I want to share before I go on. Okay. So actually, let's talk about the future. The future of the world is in flux. Like, we really do not know what is going to happen more than ever before, because we just don't know the impacts of climate change and how they could compound in these tipping points that are happening. So we've got these planetary conditions happening. At the same time, regulations are really speeding up. So things are a lot more regulated in regards to sort of circular design, ESG commitments, a lot more in Europe than here in Australia, but that's a sign that things are going to get a lot more regulated here as well, and we need to get ready for it. And designers need to become more generalist. Don Norman's been talking about how human-centered designers need to become more generalist, and because they're ready to do it, because they understand people, they've got the skills for research, etc. Layla Akaroglu, I struggle with that name, is a co-founder of The Unschool, talks about how designers need to work from the multi-level perspectives. And Bruce Mao, with his massive change business, talks about education as well, needs to be more collaborative, co-creative, and cross-disciplinary. So it's about getting future ready with your design skills and your business thinking so that you can do this zooming in and out and you can see the ecosystem and you can change things around at your design level or at your business level to have it to connect and have these impacts on global goals. So I have this Life-Centered Design Foundations course. Just jump that out of the way. It's 7 weeks. And it's just the foundations. There's a lot to life-centered design. There's a lot you can do because there's really amazing design practices that just bring so much more impact into design. But to start, there's some foundations. So the first week, you just learn ecosystem mapping. So you choose a product-based business, and you will actually map the ecosystem and its ecosystem impacts and start to see what it's taking from the planet. In the second week, it's about doing less harm. So you'll optimize your product and its life cycle to be as circular and inclusive as possible. That's doing less harm, taking less, creating less waste. And then you reassess things and see, okay, what are we still taking from the planet? What vulnerable communities are still being impacted? You will create personas for them. You'll learn how to make a multimedia one as well. And this is where regenerative design comes in, because this is where you really hone in on particular parts of nature or vulnerable communities that are really being impacted. And they're the ones to prioritize giving back more and regenerating them. You then look at how your projects connects to sustainable development goals, as I mentioned earlier, and innovate ways to connect with them more and support them more. And this starts to give you your business and your project, I don't know if a higher purpose is the right word, but almost like a dual purpose, like a planetary secondary purpose. And this is a new module I've added, which is foresight and futures thinking. Basically using the futures wheel, if you've heard of that, which is a really great tool to start to brainstorm consequences of your designs and see and start to see perhaps unseen consequences. There's an issue with circular design called rebound effects, and it's when you might design something that you think is going to have a sustainable impact, but if you don't think it through far enough, it can have these a much larger negative unsustainable impact. And also setting metrics is really, really important because you've got to measure these changes. And there's kind of simple ways to do that based on data so that you can track, make sure you're having the right impacts and iterate as needed. And this kind of flow does fit quite well into an existing workflow as well. And then on the last week is when you present back your life-centered redesign and you get feedback, and then we sort of end up talking about how do we take it forward into our work and how do we keep it going. I've developed some tips over the last few years on how to do that, how to get into your workflow and how to advocate for it as well. So that starts on the 27th of August. Enrollment's open tomorrow. Actually, I've opened them tonight. It's 2.5 to 3 hours a week. It just depends on how many participants, because one of the little strengths is the feedback sessions when people bring back their work. We have an hour discussion each week, looking at everyone's work to give feedback from myself and the other participants. And that's a very, very rich experience. So if there's more participants, I make the sessions longer. So you complete a design project, you get a toolkit, you get all this feedback and a nice little certificate as well. Otherwise, you can sort of choose your own path to learn more about it through the Life-Centered Design website. There's guidebooks, they have downloadable toolkits. There's more tools in the dashboard. It's just you just register a free account. They're free tools. And sign up for the monthly newsletter. So this is where I like share mindsets, like things like do less harm and do more good, and actual ways to implement them, how to get practical. I'm really focused on how to make this really, really practical because it's been kind of a big, great idea for a while, but it's about how do we really, really implement it. Burgess asking on the time zones. Yes, it's one time, so it doesn't work great for the US. I think it's 7 p.m., which I think is, depending where you are in Europe, it's about 11 or 12, 11 a.m. or 12. And yeah, CSST. So in Amsterdam, I think it's like 11 a.m. in the morning on a Tuesday. So for 2.5 hours. So try to get it over lunch, but yeah, it's a bit hard to sort of sync it with time zones. But everyone just brings their own project, your own product-based business that you redesign, which is a great way to sort of start to get this thinking and experience them in an actual design process from beginning to end. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions about anything that's seen tonight? Perhaps anyone want to share why they're interested in life-centered design, or how far you are along in your journey with life-centered design? Anyone going to be brave? Yes. Pavlos.
Hey, hello again. So I'm pretty new to this concept. I'm a UI UX designer, and I pretty recently discovered the life-centered design. But the problem I have is that I don't know how to include it in my process and how it can help digital products. Just to give you some context, I started my own design studio recently, and I have a lot of digital product design projects. And I'm trying to find ways to include this into my existing process, but I'm not sure how it can work. And one example of a project I got recently is a digital product that gathers data from various sources to help small businesses make better decisions. And I have no idea how to include this, and even if it can be included, and if it can work on every project, on every,
Yeah, it's Harvard Digital. Have you heard of SUX, S-U-X?
Yeah.
Or UX? Yeah. So that's a great network to get in and learn from for digital. There's also sustainableweb.org, I think it is, which is like, I mean, there's some really, really basic, simple things that you can implement straight away, optimizing images, minimizing journeys, having green hosting, that sort of thing that you can just implement. Key thing with those, a tip for those, is to embed them in style guides for yourself and for your clients, because then you don't have to do so much thinking every time you design. It's embedded in the style guide, like we embed accessibility in style guides. Non-human personas, they can be tricky. I guess if you're working with a digital service that sells a physical product, you can identify the non-human persona that's impacted by the physical product, but you can also just create one non-human persona for nature or earth and just use them at the start of projects to get people thinking more holistically as well. And then there's sustainable user journey maps. I've got one in Miro, a template. It's just like a user journey, but then you also think what environments are impacted and what perhaps non-users are impacted as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just start simple, but try this sustainable user journey map. It doesn't always generate stuff, but just the more you use it, the more you kind of get comfortable with it. And it starts to sort of generate ideas that way. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. Any other thoughts? Who else is looking to learn more about it, and what challenges are you facing?
Good here. I hope it works. Sitting in the garden. So sorry that I'm not on camera. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
I'm just gonna say we've got a minute.
Sorry?
Just letting you know we've got a minute left and it's gonna run out.
Okay. I'm interested. I'm a design manager and interested in how I can integrate that. I work for IKEA and how I can actually integrate that in the different processes as well.
Mhm.
and how to do this from small scale to bigger scale. So I'm wondering where are the connection points, because we do a lot, but it's all very scattered.
Yeah.
And this kind of lens only a few designers bring to the table so far.
Yeah, it's a very creative lens. Like there's a real technical lens where you're measuring carbon and you have a proper energy transition plan, but this is a real creative perspective and approach. I met with the Lifestyle Design Collective. We did a paper and we used a chair from IKEA for applying different tools. So I'll share that with you. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll share it with you. You might find it
Thank you.
interesting. And the course starts on the 27th, Bridget. So you can check that out on the website there. I'm going to run out of time. I just want to say thanks a lot for coming. I hope you found it interesting. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I share things on there as well.